Good morning and welcome to what will be a special edition of Lydia News, a 2019 summary of where we are now. Might be a bit of a long one, I'm not going to lie, there's quite a lot to cover, but stick with me. This is Lydia News. I really want to come on this morning and be really positive about Brexit, to cast off the doubts of yesteryear and to take on the optimism that many leavers feel about us exiting the EU, which will be happening on 29th of March this year, which I believe is 85 days from now. I won't lie, I found that really difficult, not only because of my own pro-European stance, but even pro-Brexit economists, of which there are not many, have said the very best that the UK can expect from its economy over the next few years is sluggish growth, maybe with a boost if we agree a Brexit deal. Most economists are much more pessimistic, pointing to uncertainty leading to instability in the markets, as well as a hesitancy to invest. And we'd also be leaving the cosy confines of the world's biggest trading bloc at a time that even the biggest economies in the world, such as China, are facing a slowdown. But you'd expect economists to be circumspect, especially when the final outcome is still unknown. Theresa May heads back to European leaders this week to see if she can get any movement on a legal definition of the temporary nature of the backstop, and they don't want to budge on that. Who remembers me using fruit to describe the various Brexit factions in Parliament? You'll remember the plum was no deal, tangerine was Theresa May's deal, orange was Norway Plus, apple was extending Article 50, and the lemon was the second referendum. Let's just update that a little bit. Now, while all those factions still currently exist, the EU has said, we've agreed the Theresa May deal, that's what's on the table, we're not renegotiating. So, technically, the oranges and the apples are going to have to become lemons, plums or tangerines by the 21st of January. First, let's recap on the deal struck between the UK government and the European Union, which awaits ratification by the UK Parliament and by the European Parliament, otherwise known as Theresa May's deal. So it ends freedom of movement and it also takes the UK out of the jurisdiction of the ECJ. The UK would no longer be a member of the single market, but the deal paves the way for an extensive free trade agreement with the EU that, because we're already so aligned with the single market in terms of rules and regulations, that there will potentially be no fees, no tariffs or charges. The UK gains another 3 jewels in its Brexit crown by leaving the common fisheries policy, leaving the common agricultural policy, both of which it has big issues with, and we still get to make trade deals with other countries around the world. So, what's wrong with it? Critics of the deal, of which there are many from both the Leave and Remain side, say that it's a compromise that is beyond a bodge, and that having the ECJ as the final arbiter in disputes means that we haven't really left the jurisdiction of the ECJ at all. The major problem is the border between the Republic and Northern Ireland, which technically on leaving the single market should be a hard border, but that contravenes the Good Friday Agreement, never to have physical border infrastructure in Northern Ireland. Now, this deal caters for that by what's called the backstop, which is an insurance policy that should the UK and the EU not reach a deal on its future relationship by the end of December 2020, that the UK and Northern Ireland would remain in the EU customs union. Both the UK government and the European Union stress that the backstop should never have to be used. Neither of them want to use it, and if it were to be used, it would only be a temporary measure. But this temporary nature is what really upsets MPs, because they feel it's a way for the EU to trap us in the EU. Now, Theresa May is fond of saying it's either my deal or it's no deal, and should MPs or the European Parliament fail to ratify the agreement that's currently on the table, then no deal it is, and we start trading with the world on WTO rules. Now, the good thing about a no deal is that it's the purest form of Brexit, and a lot of people believe that that's what they were voting for when they voted to leave. It would mean that we would have no ties whatsoever with the European Union. We'd be free to do whatever we wanted with no ties to anyone whatsoever anywhere. The major downside to the no deal is that we would have no ties with anyone anywhere, and that all of our current trade deals would go in the bin because we form those trade deals as members of the European Union single market, of which we would no longer be a member in any way. Those of you who watched my episode on how to understand Brexit through sugar will have heard me say that there are those who see opportunity in the European Union, and there are those who see opportunity everywhere but the European Union. And I think that really is the essence of no deal. It's the idea that we need to just start again. And there are those that would argue that no deal is the best option for the city because our financial services are truly global, and it would allow us to become like Bermuda, a tax haven, or like Singapore, an international banking hub, which we already are technically. But My major problem with this argument is while financial services and the city are major drivers of our economy, they look after all our pensions and we all need them, it's being proposed by a sector that is already wealthy, it's set to become wealthier, and has not felt the repercussions of its own actions before. Rather than those that caused the financial crash, it was those at the lower end of society that paid for it. And this is the problem with no deal, is that while the city and financial services could bring the UK economy back after Brexit, the people who will pay for it is everybody else. Now, before Christmas, I pretty much dismissed no deal because there was no majority for it in Parliament. But remember that no deal is the inevitable consequence of voting down Theresa May's deal. And remember that apple and orange I just put back in the fruit bowl? They've got to become something, unless they become a lemon. What would your lemon second referendum offer you? Would it be between Theresa May's deal and no deal? And which would campaign for who? I mean, you're going to have one which decimates the UK economy in large part, or one which fudges everything else. Neither are very desirable. Many argue that any second referendum would have to include Remain, which is going to be an avocado in this case. So does that make it a three-way referendum, which would split the vote? Or do you take out Theresa May's deal? That's not a good choice. That's not a good choice. I'm trying to demonstrate that a second referendum creates more problems than it resolves. Unless any result was completely conclusive, which is unlikely, then we still end up in a status of unknown. And even staying within the EU has its problems. Even in the very unlikely occurrence that we end up staying in the EU, which would require an immense political turnaround. We didn't participate when we were members before. What makes you think that we would suddenly make the most of our membership? We didn't for 40 years. What would change? Hello, I had to pause recording earlier because I had a party to go to and then I had to walk the dog and it's now dark. So, all of that is all fine, but we haven't covered the fruit that I put back in the fruit bowl, have we? What I talked about earlier was the technical status quo. The EU said that it wasn't going to consider any other options apart from Theresa May's deal. However, with Brexit, I think we've always got to be prepared for the curveball. There might even be a banana. I was talking to somebody earlier who's quite close to the action, who was saying that MPs with all of their various views don't want to push too early for any of these, in case by pushing it too early, then it gets taken out of the question, like the second referendum or the Norway deal. And the banana stands for an unknown unknown. So we have known knowns, which are Theresa May's deal that's on the table. A known unknown would be whether we're actually going to ratify that deal or not. And then an unknown unknown is something that we have no idea about. We cannot plan for it because we haven't even thought what it could be. A good example would be something like 9/11. No one saw that coming, no one was prepared for it, and it changed everything.